Hey everybody, it's Joe with J Blake Photo. I wanted to chat with you for just a couple of minutes about the reasons why I'm going to be switching from Adobe Premiere Pro CC to Apple's Final Cut Pro 10 on the Macintosh. First off, I want to say that I've been using Adobe Premiere in some form or another since version 4.2 I think. I think in version 5 it came out on the PC. I've been using it on the PC and on the Mac since I was in high school when I was using shoulder-mounted Super VHS video recorders. We used Avid Cinema and we used Adobe Premiere to edit our videos. We're using VHS decks, A/B switching decks back in the analog days. I've done all of that. I had this Panasonic 3CCD camcorder back in the day that I used that took DV tape. I've done all that stuff, FireWire connections into it. Adobe Premiere has been something that I've been using for a long time, and I really enjoy it. I love it. It's fun to use. It's got a lot of really great tools, especially coming from that A/B deck environment where you had the the switcher and the wheel and the toggle and set your in and out points. All of that really felt familiar switching to Adobe Premiere in a non-linear situation. So I want to make this clear. The reason that I'm switching from Adobe Premiere Pro is not because I have a lot of issues with it, to be quite honest. I really enjoy using it, and probably all of my videos except for one or two on my channel were made using either Premiere Pro, or if I edit it on my iPad, using LumaFusion. I've got a lot of videos about how to use LumaFusion, and I've edited most of the videos that I've done on my Mac using Premiere Pro. So for anyone who's been following my channel, you know that I've done photography for a really long time, but my background was actually using Photoshop. So I've been using Adobe applications for 20 plus years. I used Adobe Premiere a long time ago, then I got out of video editing and didn't really do a whole lot of it. Then just recently I really got back into it and started doing a lot more of the video editing and posting to YouTube stuff. And for that I was using Adobe Premiere. In the time that I didn't do a lot of editing, I've gone through a couple of different PCs, a couple of different desktop workstations or desktop machines that have been my kind of go-to primary sit-down computers, and I haven't upgraded my PC in about 6 years. So the computer that you see behind me is a 2011 stock off-the-shelf, came in a box. Came in this box actually. This is the box that it came in. So I've had this same computer for 6 years, and it's been really solid. I bought a MacBook Air for laptop stuff, but not a super powerful machine. And the iMac has really worked well for me. It's done a lot, and so it's only now that I'm doing a lot of video editing in the last 3 or 4 months that I've started to notice that its performance just isn't what I need to get video editing done with Premiere. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, it has a Core i5 processor with only 4 threads, so it can only do 4 things at a time. It's not a super fast processor. And the computer originally came with an old style spinning hard drive. So it also has a Radeon graphics card. Radeon graphics cards don't normally work really well with Adobe Premiere. Adobe really likes CUDA, likes to talk to NVIDIA, but it's got a Radeon card in it with only, I think it's like 512 megabytes of VRAM. So again, 2011 off-the-shelf iMac. It's now 2018. It's been 6 or 7 years. The computer is a little old. I have made some upgrades to it. Number one, I upgraded to a SSD drive. I actually popped the screen off with the help of my wife and her tiny hands, and I was able to pull that spinning hard drive out, replace it with a Samsung 850 EVO about 6 months ago. So that has significantly improved my performance. The iMac in 2011 also did not have USB 3. It was capped at USB 2, but it did have Thunderbolt. So I actually have a Thunderbolt to USB 3 dongle adapter on the back, which is connected to my external hard drive. So that's how I do a lot of my storage for long-term stuff, is I put it on an external drive. That external drive is inside a cheap USB 3 enclosure, and I swap out hard drives. I just go and buy 7200 RPM Western Digital black drives when they go on sale at Newegg, and I just copy them and store them, and I keep a backup, and then I keep an extra drive. So that has been cheap, it's been easy. I also maxed out the RAM, so it's at 16 gigs, and that really hasn't been a problem. The main issue for me has not been storage or speed, it's been graphics power and how Adobe Premiere really uses it. I bought the Mavic Pro. My wife got me the Mavic Pro for Christmas. I've been shooting some 4K footage. I know that the Mavic Pro shoots in 1080p just fine, but I also know that shooting in 4K and then downscaling it to 1080p, you end up getting a much clearer picture. Trying to do that in Adobe Premiere on this machine has been a nightmare. The ability to jog shuttle from frame to frame just isn't there. It just hangs up, it just holds. It's just a matter of the fact that I can't manage those videos in the editing platform. It doesn't work. 1080p is pretty good, but the 4K stuff is killing me. And I'm also shooting sometimes 4K on my iPhone, and I'm shooting time lapses on the 6D on this camera that are also in 4K. So you throw all that together, and this computer really just cannot handle the kind of work that I'm doing. So why don't I just buy a new computer? Well, because my wife just bought me a brand new drone, and I'm not really sure I'm going to be able to convince her that we've got a brand new computer in the budget. So what I decided to do was give Final Cut Pro a shot. So that last vlog that I did about flying the drone through the slot canyon, I didn't originally intend on using Final Cut for that, but when I started loading the 4K footage, I had to make the decision. Number one, did I want to render a bunch of proxy files? Did I want to encode them in another application and then edit them in? I really wanted to keep them at that level, and I didn't want to spend a million years rendering it to see how it would look. So I decided to give Final Cut a try, and I think the video came out really well. It was fun to edit. The tools were very similar. A lot of people have said that switching from Premiere to Final Cut is very difficult. I didn't see that. I've used Final Cut before, but nowhere near as much as I've used Premiere, especially recently, and I've gotten pretty quick at using Premiere, learning some tips and tricks from people like Peter McKinnon and Roberto Blake and Casey Neistat, but honestly, I didn't notice that it was that difficult to switch. And I think part of that is because I'm just doing simple vlogs, right? I'm doing some time lapses, I'm doing some drone footage, I'm doing a couple of different things and then slamming it together, throwing a couple of nice music tracks down, and then rendering it out. So I think the vlog style and the tutorial style really lends itself to the process that is available in Final Cut Pro. So that brings me to the first official reason why I'm switching, at least for now, to Final Cut Pro. Number one is the stability of the platform. So even using 4K footage without proxies, just optimized using the reduced resolution, it plays just fine. Now, I have also tried using optimized proxy media, and that worked even better. But just throwing 4K footage right into it with this old computer worked perfectly well. I was able to edit an 11-minute vlog with about 45 minutes of footage from the drone alone. I was able to scrub through, set in and out points, drop into the timeline, add effects, and add in my music and my adjustments, and move on. And the stability really allowed me to pay more attention to some of the effects and some of the more advanced editing techniques that I wanted to use. So I was able to, utilize speed ramps a little bit more than I have in the past. I was able to pay more attention to the audio cues. I could do all this before, but I had more time because the platform felt smoother. The software felt like I was able to just kind of slide through. It was a little bit easier for me. Again, Premiere offers that, I'm sure, if you had a faster computer. I have a much faster computer at my office at work, and honestly, that one chews through Premiere no problem, but it's a Windows PC, and I prefer Mac at home, and Premiere just doesn't run as well on my Mac as it does on that Windows PC. The Windows PC that I have in my office has 64 gigs of RAM, it's got a Core i7 7700K, and it's got a NVIDIA GeForce 1060 GT. So yeah, it doesn't do too bad video editing. But I'm not editing my vlogs at work. So the stability of the software is the number one thing. The number two is the simplicity of the user interface. Premiere has every single control, dial, and command at your fingertips. There's just so much in there. The user interface is just, I mean, there's so much stuff. Whereas with Final Cut, you log in and it looks almost sparse. It almost looks like you're missing stuff. But as you go through it, you kind of realize that a lot of those same tools are there. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And so as I've gone through this process and done a couple of videos, that vlog included, which is probably the longest video that I've done and posted to my YouTube channel from Final Cut. But that was really a good example and a good exercise for me to see how well it would go. And the user interface simplicity was great. Plus, there's just some stuff in there that I like. For one, when I load a clip up and I'm setting in and out points, I can see the audio track. Whereas with Premiere, and put it in the comments if I'm wrong, because I haven't been able to find this, but I like to see the video and then the audio track underneath, all right? I do things like snap when I've got a cut that I want to make, right? If I screw up and I want to go ahead and cut there and move to the next clip, I do a snap. Or if I stop talking and I'm not really sure what I'm going to say next, I want to be able to cut that out, and I can see that by seeing the waveform under the video. And in Premiere, for some reason, it doesn't have that. It's got easy to use keystrokes, just like Premiere. Those seem pretty simple. And dragging, selecting, and applying effects is pretty much the same, right? You've got a tool preset, you've got, you know, sliders and bars and selections and drop downs and all that sort of stuff. So that process for me, again, the types of videos that I'm throwing up on YouTube, works really well with the user interface that's provided with Final Cut Pro. It seems to work really well for me. So the third and final thing that I've kind of come to realize as I've been editing with Final Cut, and again, I've heard tons of people say this, render, render, render. The render speeds are super fast with Final Cut. And I thought, okay, they're faster, but how much faster can they actually be? And I kind of took for granted the idea that Final Cut renders in the background. So if you're using Premiere and you're editing a clip and you add an adjustment layer, or you add text, or you do a cut, or maybe your footage, your 4K footage, doesn't conform specifically to your 1080p timeline, and you want to go ahead and show what it would look like conformed or set to the frame size. So you're going to render that clip or render that selection. Well, when you're running a 2011 iMac, that can be a little hard. Not to mention the fact that when you're rendering those individual clips, you can't do anything else. You're stuck. And it takes a while. Even if I've got a 10-second clip of 4K footage with one adjustment layer, with one LUT, and maybe that's it, right? And I'm conforming it to a 1080p, that might take 45 seconds, a minute and a half for a 10-second clip, just for me to be able to view it, to see, did I get that clip cut right? Is that adjustment going to be too over the top? Do I need to reduce the intensity of that LUT? All those types of questions that I need to answer that are just quick, kind of moving along my project. I can't do that in Premiere with the hardware that I have. With Final Cut Pro, I don't have to do that. I can move on to a different part of the project, continue cutting, editing, and rendering, and then go back to what I was looking at before just to play through it. Or I can just hit select and render it. And while it renders, I can work on something else. That's really, really nice. Plus, if I decide to stand up and walk down the hall and get a drink of water, or use the restroom, or eat something, or spend some time with my wife, I can walk away from an edit, and when I come back, all of the different components have been rendered in the background, which is awesome, because if I'm close to being done, I'm close to hitting export, then all I need to render are the little parts that I do at the end. So really what I'm able to do is utilize my time better. So there were a handful of really specific things that I needed to know that I could do before I moved to Final Cut. Not so much that I knew Final Cut could do it. I figured Final Cut could do pretty much anything I needed it to do, but how easy would it be for me to do it, and how quickly would I be able to learn it? Number one was color correction and adjustments, and number two was speed ramps. I do a lot of speed ramps in my B-roll footage. I think it looks nice. I like to try and match it to the music. Doing that in Premiere is relatively straightforward, although I really don't like using the sliders and the Bezier curves. I knew it was there, it was easy to get to, it's easy to play with. In Final Cut Pro, it took me a couple of minutes to get there. So I actually think I'm gonna make an instructional, just a quick tutorial video on how to do speed ramps in Final Cut Pro. I did a lot of Googling, I did a lot of YouTube searching just to get a good technique of how to do that, and I found a lot of people using the blade tool, just some really kind of strange ways to get to it when the range selection tool gives you really everything that you need. So that was the first thing. And the second thing, with color correction, so here's the thing. Without using any plugins, and I know that there are tons and tons of plugins out there for Final Cut Pro, but Lumetri Color is a very powerful tool inside Premiere. Without Lumetri Color, I am missing a little bit in terms of my control. It might not be real. I know that the palette, the color board in Final Cut Pro probably has a lot of power to it. I just need to learn how to use it a little bit better. But coming from Adobe Photoshop and coming from Adobe Lightroom, you know, a highlight slider and a shadow slider and a color slider, those are things that I'm really used to. The board, the paddles on the color board are a little new and different for me. I think it came out good when I did my color correction on my last set of videos that I did in Final Cut Pro, but I still need some time to learn it. I would say that that would be the #1 downside. The #2 downside would be being able to adjust multiple clips at one time. I know that I can create a title and apply that. I haven't really played with that much yet, but I really like the simplicity and the uniformity of an adjustment layer. Again, coming from Photoshop, adjustment layers, you apply that to your entire stack and everything matches. In Premiere, you add your adjustment layer. You can put multiple clips on top of each other, throw one adjustment layer on the top, and you know that they're all going to have that same adjustment. Now, adjustments aren't always great for the same clips. In some clips, you need different color correction, but if it's something like bars or a logo or something that you just know that you need to throw on there, it's nice to be able to do it to more than one clip. And if you're doing something a little more fast-paced and you're doing kind of a vlog style with a lot of different cuts, applying that same adjustment over and over and over, I think it's a little boring. So I can see how that would be more difficult. Again, if there's a better way to do it, throw it in the comments. I'm happy to hear, I'm happy to learn. I am no expert in Final Cut Pro. In Premiere, I feel a lot more comfortable, but I was able to edit that vlog and export it in considerably less time and not have to deal with worrying about proxy media or deal with my 4K footage. It just worked, and it worked smoothly. And the quality of the edit was pretty good. I thought it was actually my best vlog to date. I don't know if that was Final Cut Pro or just the fact that I planned a little bit better, but it was a really fun time. So just to recap, I love Adobe Premiere. I've been using it for a very long time. I think it's an extremely powerful tool. I know that it's used in a wide range of professional environments. But for me, on 7-year-old hardware, right now, being able to edit 4K footage out of my drone and 1080p footage out of my DSLR camera, as well as some of the extra effects and special things that I want to be able to do, right now I think Final Cut is the direction that I'm going to be going. I'm really kind of curious to see if anyone else has made the same transition with older Mac hardware. I'm going to be doing probably a video on my Mac hardware and some of the things that I've done, but really, you know, I'm trying to max out this device and get it like another, at least one more year out of it. Hopefully, as long as Apple will continue to update this machine, I'll continue to use it. But we'll see what happens when I start playing with Final Cut quite a bit. I might max it out. We'll see what happens. But I'm excited to learn new things about this application and try new things and use both Final Cut and Premiere. Will I go back to Premiere? Absolutely. There's no way that I'm not going to use both of these applications side by side. There are going to be things that I want to do in Premiere. There's going to be things that I want to do in Final Cut. The other question that I'm sure people are going to ask is, but the connection with Creative Cloud, with Premiere and After Effects and Photoshop, isn't that important to you? And really, for what I'm doing, the only things that I would do in Premiere that I would then send out to After Effects would be things like motion graphics and maybe some motion blur. But I think I can get most of that done in Final Cut, but that's something I'm going to have to learn. I don't do a lot of that stuff though, and at the end of the day, if I absolutely had to, I could always export to ProRes, drop it into After Effects, and continue editing it there. Although if you think Premiere runs slow on this computer, After Effects is no better. So that's it, everybody. Those are my thoughts. I just wanted to leave that with you. Feel free to comment on this video if you have an opinion on Adobe Premiere versus Final Cut Pro 10 on the Macintosh, especially if you have older Mac hardware. I'd love to hear from people using older Mac hardware, older MacBook Pros, older iMacs, maybe even some Mac Minis. Let me know how you're doing with Final Cut versus Premiere. If you like videos like this, go ahead and hit the like button. If you think other people that you know might benefit from this kind of video, go ahead and hit share. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button, and you'll continue to get videos like this in your feed. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.